Looking at these stories and some inside in a bit more detail is Noah Khogali, Conservative councillor and political commentator. Noah, good morning.
Morning, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Someone who's got a difficult job and has had a difficult night is the Prime Minister. Why do you think we're seeing so much delay over why it is Rishi Sunak hasn't made a decision on the status of Dominic Raab and his employment?
So I think this is actually quite simple. At the time, there was no independent ethics advisor, so there was nobody to make an actual judgment over whether Raab was guilty of bullying. So whatever the report said, that was always going to lie with Rishi Sunak. And if it wasn't 100% clear cut, that was always going to take some time. I can't imagine it jumped right to the top of his stack of papers. So the delay we're seeing is probably that. I think what people should probably expect to come out of this, especially with the tight-lippedness of the government, is that we see something other than a resignation. So potentially a public apology, Raab being sent on some anger management courses, some docking of ministerial pay, something like that, so that there's a midpoint between not upsetting all of the, quite often older Conservatives who just believe this is a wet civil service, and those who want to see the integrity of government and the standards within upheld.
Is it really appropriate for someone to have to go on an anger management course?
The question's going to be asked about that. And I'm not saying that's definitely something that's going to happen, but it might do. There are going to be, whatever the answer here, a lot of questions about the appropriateness of Raab continuing to work in the government and continuing to work with the civil servants who he knows have complained against him. There have, of course, been reports that Raab knows their names and their identities, possibly because he remembers the actual occasions that they've complained about, potentially, the now oddly notorious tomato throwing incident. So things like that are obviously going to lead to questions, but this is tricky for Rishi now in that he's been making some poll recoveries because he's given off this air of competent government, some might say principled, and that is at risk now, whichever decision he makes, because there's a risk of losing voters that have stuck by the Conservatives and expect Rishi to do the same as Boris did for Priti Patel. But there is also a risk that those who have just started pledging their support to Rishi again abandon him because he starts to look a little bit more like Boris.
Matthew, the newsagent, who's a member of the Early Morning Breakfast Club, has messaged in saying whether Mr Raab is found to have breached the ministerial code or to have simply bullied his co-workers, then he should go. Perhaps the Prime Minister is delaying in the hope that he'll do the right thing and resign rather than having to sack him. No, it doesn't look like the Deputy Prime Minister will resign.
No, I'd be surprised whether he does, and I think if he does, it'll be potentially a go or will push you situation. I think the fundamental bit that was touched on there is that this risks becoming a not against the rules, but against the spirit of the rules situation again, which the government can't, or this government specifically, needs to be very wary of projecting the image of, because it kind of links them to the past that they've been trying to cut off and have started to do so quite effectively of those previous Johnson incidents and the images that people had of the integrity of the Conservatives then.
Let me know what you think. Text 87222. Start your message with the word Times. What should happen to Dominic Raab? Should Rishi Sunak remove him? Should he resign? Or do we need to wait until maybe we've all seen the reports, if we actually get to? You can text 87222. Start your message with the word Times. Noah, the front page of the Mail is talking about, they're suggesting that unelected lords risk triggering public outrage if they block tough new immigration measures. This, of course, is about trying to get Suella Braverman's plan to get these migrant deportation flights actually off the ground to go to Rwanda. What do you make of this?
So I think the most frustrating thing for lots of people, especially in government here, is that £140 million was spent and pledged a year ago, and literally nothing has happened. That is, a quite large indictment on both the plan and everybody involved. After a year of essentially dilly-dallying and talking about other potential plans, whether we're going to start putting people on boats sitting on the shore. This kind of thing is systemic of the large problem here, that is touched on by the public polling, which is that almost 50% of the public supports it, but most of them don't think it's actually going to work. This is the fundamental issue: is that the government have started to promise lots of things and promise solutions that are going to run into roadblocks every step of the way, whether that's the Lords, whether that's external courts. It is an incredibly hard problem that the government have essentially embarked on a comms strategy of saying, look, we can solve this, we will solve this, which they're entirely committed to do. But when they can't, and it's incredibly difficult, that's not a great look.
No, I mean, they've pledged time and time again now, we will stop the boats. How much sort of confidence and conviction do you have that they've actually got the infrastructure, that the legal structures in place to be able to actually action that policy?
I feel like I've probably said this to you before, last time I was on, but I think the reality here is that this is not a problem that's going to be solved unless we have a proper reform of the way that we view immigration in this country, both in providing routes for those people that really need to come here and to engage with that support, but in also to make use of those people that can come here and can contribute to the labour force. There is a proper reset that is needed from both sides of the aisle in the way that we talk and that we look at immigration, so that we avoid essentially, I'm not saying all of them, but instead forcing a proportion of people to come here on small boats because they think it's their only route of getting here, whether that's because they just don't know or they've been hoodwinked by traffickers. There's a variety of reasons that may be true, but in terms of the long-term solution here, it has to be fundamental to that we have a proper reset for the way that we think and we talk about immigration.
Ofsted makes the pages of the papers. I'm looking inside the Telegraph here, and it says Ofsted's not responsible for improving schools. That's the comments of the chief inspector, defending sort of the use of what has now become quite a controversial grading policy. They say the watchdog's role is limited to diagnosing problems and its judgments are useful. How much do you think that there does actually need to be a reform of how our schools are assessed?
So the reason that Ofsted have taken the line that it's not their job to improve schools but just to provide a judgment is that they believe from the work they've done that parents find the one-word judgments really helpful. And be that as it may, that can remain whilst at the same time Ofsted doesn't just do that and that's it. They can provide something far more thorough and far more nuanced whilst at the same time providing a headline, skimming score for people. Whether that's something in the future, like we have in terms of something like university ranking tables, where you can see different levels across different things, whether that's pastoral, whether that's purely academic, and you can make a judgment about a school based on that might be far more effective. And that's something I think Ofsted needs to look at in the long term, but that also needs to come from government. The reality is that this is an incredibly sad and emotional situation. We need to be careful not to rush into any judgments here. We're still quite close to the really sad case of Ruth Perry. But in the long term, Ofsted needs to evolve with the times and with the fact that they should probably be giving more information to parents. And whilst parents might appreciate the ease of having a one-word answer, it may not actually give them the best ability to judge a school.
Yeah, it's been highly controversial, and how they'll go on with those systems of being up for under scrutiny. On the front pages of many of the papers, Noah, are photographs of Elon Musk's latest project, SpaceX, launching its biggest and most powerful rocket ever made in a landmark test. But let's just have a little reminder of how it went.
The entire Starship stack continuing to rotate. We should have had separation by now. Obviously, this does not appear to be a nominal situation.
Yeah, it does appear to be spinning, but I do want to remind everyone that everything after clearing the tower was icing on the cake.
Oh, so it didn't quite go to plan, but still being heralded as a success by Elon Musk. We were told it suffered a rapid, unscheduled disassembly. It was a very expensive experiment, wasn't it, Noah?
Yes, and I think this is kind of symptomatic of the approach that SpaceX has taken, that has really both encapsulated the excitement of the public, but also made them quite unique in their own right compared to someone like NASA, in that they've taken this approach of, look, we'll just do things quickly. If they blow up, we've got the cash to do it again, and kind of iron out the rapid unscheduled disassemblies in the air rather than, on a simulator. And in saying that, that kind of lends itself to the fact that this wasn't a massive failure. Yes, there was an explosion. It was meant to land in the ocean. But the reality is that this was something that got off the ground, that if we can get it to space proper next time, can get people to the moon and to Mars. This is a huge step forward, a huge success, despite there being, a little bit of firebally mayhem on the way. Which is
fireballing. Yes, a little bit, quite a large bit yesterday. Talking of mayhem, Noah, finally, we've had many warnings that this phone warning is coming this weekend at 3:00 on Sunday afternoon. Lots of people have raised sort of concern about this. I wonder if we're now getting to points of potential, well, the headline in the Mail is Mobile Alert will terrify pets in shops. And pet shop bosses yesterday are cross that they weren't consulted about the alarm. Is this a lot of fuss over nothing?
Yeah, I think so. I've got a bit of frustration, really. Look, my dog's a rescue. She's lovely. She probably gets freaked out by loud noises. So, at 3 p.m. on Sunday, I'll make sure that my phone is not directly next to her head. There's an element of responsibility has to be taken. Look, everyone knows when it's going to happen. Ensure that any pets that you're worried about are in a situation where they're not going to be freaked out.
Do we need this emergency alarm? Is it a useful thing?
I think probably, yes. The risk is always run that if something massive happened and, we hadn't taken 30 seconds out of our day on a random Sunday in April, that, our response is somewhat limited because we don't all know what's going to happen and what the process is. I don't know what that huge crisis or tragedy would be, whether it be something terrorist related, but we'd hope that all the systems that are, this isn't a massive problem in everyone's Sunday, are in place to allow us to deal with that best. There's always concerns of government overreach, and people don't like when the government appears in their day-to-day lives. And they always get upset about that, and often rightly so. But this is not one of those occasions. This is a very sensible public safety measure that we've had ample warning for. And I do hope all the dogs and all the pets are okay. But it is on pet owners and pet shop owners to make sure that is the case.
Yes, they've had warning. Noah, you've made your views very clear. It's been a pleasure to have you on the programme. Noah Khogali, Conservative councillor and political commentator.